I'm so much better at handling dickheads. You're not a happy person thinking I'm going to go and ruin her morning. You've got your own shit going on, and I was not what you needed.
Please welcome Miss Shappi Khorsandi!
The Queen of Comedy.
And I'm talking about her new book, Scatterbrain.
I had these horrific tantrums that no one but my immediate family and my partners saw. To everyone else, I was the most compliant, always cheerful, happy Shappi, but that was huge masking. And the way I masked it was avoiding any kind of conflict at work, in social situations, at school, on I'm a Celebrity. I never stood up for myself.
What clicked into place when you heard the words, "You have ADHD"?
Everything made sense because
This episode is dedicated to anyone who, when they have a conversation, goes off on 5 unnecessary tangents, gives 12 minutes of unnecessary backstory, changes topics 3 times, and ends without finishing their original thought. Just a gentle reminder that tapping the subscribe button helps us here at ADHD Chatter much more than you might realise. As our audience grows, it helps increase our chances of booking even more brilliant guests, full of amazing stories and helpful information. We're so proudly building a community here, and each and every one of our subscribers are valued members of our exclusive ADHD club. The more our community grows, the less we feel alone. So please subscribe. It will help us remind you that you're not broken, that you are and always were enough. Shappi, how are you doing?
I'm really well, thank you. And I want to thank you and your crew for putting up with my overexcited chatter for about, I think it was a good half an hour that I didn't stop talking when I came in.
Well, thank you for joining us on, I believe it's the hottest day of the year today.
I believe so. And I have made it here from the other side of London, which is a big deal for me because on hot days, I close the blinds and just sit in my room quietly eating ice. I'm not one for hot weather.
People see sweat dripping down our face mid-chat, then that's why.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it, not that we just have issues.
There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to go through here. I was reading your book, truly fascinating. I'm thinking we start from the beginning, and that leads me to ask you, what's your earliest memory of feeling different?
Nursery school. Moving to London and not being able to speak English at nursery school and thinking that English was made up words. And if I just went, people would understand. And a really strong memory I have of nursery is crying because I felt so lonely and my brother having to sit with me. But I remember when we had snack time, they'd bring a nice jug of 1970s squash, which I believe is banned now, whatever it was they put in it. It was like liquidized cardboard and sugar. It was incredible. And then they would also have a plate of biscuits on either side of this long table. And the entire morning, I would be obsessed with sitting near the biscuits. Because if I didn't sit near the biscuits, it meant that I might not be able to help myself to 2. I was utterly obsessed all morning about where I was going to sit. Nothing else mattered, nothing. It was my entire focus, and I have very strong memories about that.
I can't even imagine going to a school and not speaking the language. I think loads of our listeners will relate to the feeling of feeling different in a group. Do you remember in the mornings before you went to school, knowing you were going to go into that environment, how you felt in those mornings?
Yeah, I felt terrified. I remember being in a taxi because we lived in Kensington when we first came. My dad had a flash job with a news agency when we first came to England, and then all the money disappeared after the revolution, but that's another matter. I remember being in a black cab with my mum and my brother and clinging to her and screaming and crying to the point that my mum turned the cab around and we went home and she didn't drop me off. I found separation from my family especially my brother, because we would be we got put in different classes at primary school because he's a year older than me. I found that so painful as a child. I relied on him completely to speak for me, to be the sociable one, to be the confident one. And I was so happy just to sort of plod along behind him. So, yeah, it was really difficult as a kid. I was utterly bewildered most of the time.
And of course, alongside of this, you were living with unknown ADHD. I mean, are there any particular moments you can look back with the knowledge that you have now and think, that was so obvious that I had ADHD?
Yeah. My obsessive reading. Like, people love it when kids read. And it feels weird to say that my reading was a problem. But I had to be inside a book to the point that it was quite brutal when someone disturbed me. I would go into the loo for hours with loads of books and I would put them all in between each other. And so I would not follow one story. And it would be like Andy Pandy or Mr. Men. It wasn't like, War and Peace. So I'd read a little bit of Andy Pandy. And then, because I'd put them in between each other, it would then go into another story, another story, another story. And I read the same books over and over again. And I memorized them. And at school, I was locked away in daydreaming, absolutely locked away. And I think by the time I was 12, I had quite rampant OCD as well, just doing these mantras. And if I didn't do this mantra, there would be catastrophe. And then people noticed me talking to myself. So I try and do it quietly and just make little noises for every beat of every word. And I remember my parents, the teachers wrote to the school, my parents, and said, look, she's talking to herself in class. What is it? And my best friend at school was a Jewish girl. And I said to my parents, my atheist parents, I went, my best friend's Jewish and it's a Jewish prayer she's teaching me because I want to be Jewish. And they went, all right then. No further questions were asked. So the knowledge that I have now as a parent is very different. So my little girl, I noticed that at bedtime, I read her stories. She needs the same songs in a row, the same books. And I can't deviate from that, which is quite common for children because children like the familiarity of patterns and all of that. But she started to do this thing where I'd say, right, good night, darling, love you. And she'd go, night, mummy, love you. Night, mummy, loved you. And then if I said, right, shall I shut the door? She'd go, yeah. Night, mummy, love you. So she had to make night, mummy, love you the last exchange between us. And I noticed that she was doing that. So I would say something silly like, I better go. I'll go and see what the dogs are up to. Night, night. Night, mummy, love you. So I said to her, not then and there, but the next day when we're not, it's not nighttime, she hasn't got those same fears. And I said, can I talk to you about something? I've noticed that you do that. And she sort of went, and I said, can you tell me what it would feel like if you weren't the last person to say, night, mummy, love you? And she said, I just think that you might die in the night. And I totally related to that. I went, yeah, I get that. I get that. That's the catastrophizing that I recall, but my parents, didn't have the knowledge and the tools that I have, I guess.
How does it make you feel when you hear your daughter say that? Is there a relatability and a happy feeling, or is there a feeling of you want to care for her more?
I feel with my daughter that I'm so grateful that I get her. I think with if I was a parent who was very different to her and I wouldn't get that would be a problem for her, because I see her reactions to things that are so familiar to me. Like, I have spoken to her that I understand that when you cry, it's not because you're sad. Tears come when you feel that you've been misunderstood. Tears are a reaction to being misunderstood, not being seen, not being listened to. And And I said, is it frustrating when people go, oh, don't cry because you're not? So that's not, and she was like, I'm probably giving myself far too many parent bonus points than I ought to, but I sense a relief with her that I get it. I get it. And I'm not always patient, but it does feel like I'm raising myself sometimes with my daughter. She'll hate me for saying that in years to come, but there we are.
You were diagnosed with ADHD at 47. Why do you think it took so long for you to receive a diagnosis?
I was, you know that when people talk about masking, I was so entrenched in masking, I didn't even realize I was masking. I had no clue. It was, the masking that I did was as logical as somebody, you know, my favorite film is American Werewolf in London. The masking I did was as logical as, well, I'm a werewolf and sometimes I go out and murder people and I don't want anyone to know that. So why on earth would I want to tell people that? And I was at school, I was quiet. I was struggling, but there was such a massive stigma around learning difficulties that my nightmare was that I would be put in a class for kids with learning difficulties. But that's exactly where I should have been, actually. I watched Paul Weller in an interview recently, and they said to him, how did you feel? How was school for you? And he went, oh, I hate school. I couldn't keep up. I left one out the minute I could. And Paul Weller said, looking back, I probably had some kind of learning difficulty. And I was like, yes, mate, say it. Let's say that out loud. I had a learning difficulty. Some people with ADHD can absolutely nail school, nail exams. Some people can't. I couldn't because I had too much other stuff that I was trying to cope with, socially, at home, other kind of traumas, and I didn't have a prayer. So I was good. I gave the teachers no trouble. I shouldn't speak in a middle-class accent. I went to school in Hanwell Borough, and any kid from my primary school, which was a state primary school, but it was in an affluent area, and all the kids had the sense to drop their middle-class accents the day we started high school. But I was like, are you joking? I can't be not able to do my homework and my coursework and be late and not know what lessons I'm in and speak with a Cockney accent. Are you kidding me? I'll get into trouble. So I just spoke like this all the time, which was such a brilliant way to mask. I'm so sorry, I wasn't able to do my homework because we had guests last night from Iran and it's our tradition that we help. Bollocks like that, I would say. And they'd go, oh, right, okay. Oh, she's so good. And then they were baffled by why am I so good at English and French and can't keep up with any other lesson. And looking back, I wish we had drama at my secondary school. That would have saved me. And I wish that I was able to do sport in a less petrifying environment, because I'm a good runner. I'm a really good runner. I'm a fast runner. But at school, I was one of the chubby kids that was the last to be picked and was no good. Because if someone throws a ball at me, I will run away. And the sporty kids are terrifying. And both my kids are sporty kids. And I say to them, you would have terrified me at school. But if I'd been able to go to a running club and gone, I can beat everyone at running, that would have given me so much confidence. So anyway, we live and learn, different times.
The piece on masking is hugely relatable to many people listening. I think so many people, particularly women and girls, go through their whole life masking. And in fact, a lot of them don't even realize they're doing it. And they get the diagnosis and suddenly it's like a process of unraveling what's actually them, what's a coping mechanism, what's masking. So you got diagnosed at 47, and what clicked into place when you heard the words, you have ADHD? What open-ended questions in your past suddenly made sense?
Everything. Everything made sense, because, and it even made sense. I'd gone to see a psychiatrist a few years before, and he had said, I think we need to explore PTSD and ADHD with you. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I walked out and I never made another appointment. And And I was aware of ADHD and absolutely convinced my brother had it. I would just go on and on to him, you've got ADHD, I've been reading about ADHD and you've got it. But I had it as well. I had it. I'm in no position to diagnose him. But between me and you, he's riddled with it. And so I think by about 40, I was well aware that my tantrums weren't because I was an angry person. So a huge part of my masking, and the one that I had so much shame around, as well as eating disorders, which I won't muddy the water by talking about that now, but I had these horrific tantrums that no one but my immediate family and my partners saw. To everyone else, I was the most compliant, easygoing, always cheerful, happy, shappy person. But that was huge masking. And the way I masked it was avoiding any kind of conflict and any kind of standing up for myself outside of the family, at work, in green rooms and social situations, at school, on I'm a Celebrity. I never stood up for myself because I never trusted myself angry. And then all of that would just grow and grow and blow up when I was with people who loved me. And that's why in lockdown, when I lost my shit with my children over a box of chocolates that they were squabbling over and opened, like they ripped the top open because they weren't opening it properly. And I thought, right, they're stuck with me. There's no village here raising them right now, because normally I had like my mum, my dad, my neighbours, my ex-husband all in my life with the kids. So that's when I just typed in ADHD psychotherapist, and I found my psychotherapist who, you know, spoke to me, and he had ADHD himself, and he was able to teach me so much about my process.
And do you still hide that side of you?
I was in therapy for about a month when both my children, independently of each other, said, you never shout anymore. And I don't have tantrums anymore. I get tetchy, but I know what's going on. And we went on holiday recently, and I was just like, a lot of stress. Holidays are stressful. ADHD, airports, that's kryptonite to me. Like all these sounds and noises and flashes and every announcement, even if it's like Mr. Blah, blah, and blah, blah, who are on a flight to Kuwait, go to the gate immediately. I think, oh my God, I'm late for my flight to Kuwait. I wasn't going to Kuwait. So all of that sense of urgency and panic is kryptonite for me in an airport. And even once we got to a holiday destination, I was really tetchy. And my daughter said, you are being grumpy for no reason. I was like, do you know what? You're right. I am being horrible. So I'm going to go downstairs and go to the gym by myself. And I'm really sorry. So I will be snappy, but I won't have tantrums. And I love the fact that my children don't feel scared of telling me how I'm making them feel. And my son will go, we're walking on eggshells, mummy. I'm like, right, that's not good. Sorry about that. I will. And sorry is not enough. You know, you have to take action.
I'm trying to understand what the trigger is. And I've just met you today. Would you say the trigger to these tantrums, is it a sensory issue, or is it a reaction to a criticism?
Admin. If I'm really stressed out and about to lose my shit, it's because I've got to renew my parking. I've got to open a difficult work email, or an email I think might be difficult. I might be, there's always some, as we say in Gestalt psychotherapy, which I'm training to do, there's unfinished business. And it's usually something that neurotypical people would find a bore, but able to do. And It's when I'm overwhelmed by life stuff or or the news. Like if I'm watching the news and I'm seeing horror and hell happening to children around the world, my own beautiful children will go, "Mummy, what time's dinner?" "Oh, what time's dinner?" "Oh, I do everything." And I'm like, "What are you doing, woman? You're sad because children around the world are suffering, so you're being a dick to your own kids." So I don't look at horror. I identify that that's just going to, or I'll do it in a proper space when I'm away from my kids and I can process what I'm seeing rationally. But yeah, it's never weirdly big things. It's little things that build up and build up and build up.
Very relatable for me personally. I mean, it's just a simple thing like replying to an email or a text message. I'm sure to a lot of people it's probably quite a simple thing to do, but it can be really, really overwhelming. Because you're sort of opening yourself up a bit to criticism. You sort of have to live with the guilt in a way if you don't reply within a certain time period because you think that's what's expected of you. And as a result, you could be thinking about that. There could be a compartment of your brain that's thinking about that. And then something else happens, like you see a disaster on the news or your kids are too noisy, and that can tip you into a, I guess, tantrum?
Yeah, into a spiral of just being unable to cope and not regulating your emotions, not regulating my emotions. So emotional dysregulation was the most seismic change that happened for me when I began to understand about ADHD. And that's why I'm ferociously defensive of people who talk publicly about their ADHD, because there is a little bit of a backlash of, "Oh, everyone's got another something." And I'm like, mate, if you knew what it was like, we all forget our keys. We all, really? Yeah. Do you ever hurl yogurt at the wall in front of your 3-year-old because someone hasn't replied to a text that you wrote them? Like that's shame. That's stuff that gave me so much shame. And that shame is so debilitating. So if some TikToker wants to do a reel about, what's it like when you're walking with someone ADHD, let them. Okay, if you don't get it, you don't get it, but don't start to attack us for wanting to talk publicly about it. Because it can be quite triggering, I think, for people who do have the same symptoms, who feel unable to go on a journey of understanding their own process, and perhaps they're relating a bit too much, and perhaps that's what's triggering. There's that I always feel as well.
Yeah, oh gosh, powerful. I think you've just articulated the frustration so many people have when you see that. It's almost like a cliche now. Everyone has ADHD these days, but does everyone, like you said, forget their car keys to the point that they're then late for work, which means they get fired, which means they then can't pay their mortgage and everything falls, it's really debilitating.
Yeah, I can't open my post. So I've had counter court judgments against me. I have had a real problem, like massive financial problems, because I haven't been able to cope with my admin. I don't understand it. And, if someone tries to explain to me, it feels like I'm in maths class at school. It's not that I'm rebelling. Oh, this is boring. I've got more interesting things to do. I can't focus on listening to you. A steel wall has come down in my mind, and there's a trapeze artist that is, dancing around in my brain that I am focusing on. And financially, that's another thing people don't talk about enough, especially women. It has affected me so dramatically, ADHD, to the point that I often find myself needing to make money to make up for the money I lose not being able to manage my finances. It's really, it's really difficult. So, and then people go, "Oh, but you should pay someone and you can," but to even know how to delegate, even to know what help you need and to be able to articulate that to the right person takes a degree of understanding yourself and your process that it took me a long time. It's taking me a long time to get to. And I'm much more forgiving to myself about that kind of thing now.
It's a bit like when you impulsively spend money and then it arrives and you don't want the thing anymore. So you spent money and then someone says, oh, just return it. But the process of returning something is so overwhelming. You just don't do it. And therefore you've just lost the 30 quid you've spent on a pair of trainers that you don't want to go running anymore because that was yesterday's obsession.
And then it sits there and you see it and all you see is money that you've burnt and that's shaming. And you think, I've got dependents, that could have paid for this, that could have paid for that. And then you can batter yourself into a swamp of shame like that. And that is, when people talk about treating ADHD, it's treating undiagnosed ADHD. It's really important because the damage that undiagnosed ADHD itself isn't a problem. I think there'll be a time where the term neurotypical might not even be used. It's not knowing you have it and thinking that you're just not, that word just do this, just give it back. It's easy. So now I've got brilliant friends who get me. And they help me and they quietly go, I'll sort it out, leave it to me. And I'm like, thank you. I will cook for you. I'm good at doing other things. I will have your child over for a sleepover on a weeknight. I don't care, but I can't send this back to Amazon.
Well, just you coming on today, speaking about it, people reading your book, again, it's going to help more people. You've got a great analogy about Tarzan and ADHD. Can you explain this for our audience?
God, I used to love Saturday mornings watching Tarzan. When Tarzan realizes in Tarzan, the Legend of Greystoke with Christophe Lambert, I fancied him and his ape dad. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, God. And Andy McDowell. That film has a lot to answer for. My kinks? There's ADHD. I just said that out loud. And I'm going to resist saying, can you edit that out? Fuck it, keep it in if you want. But, so I like my partner to dress up as a great ape. No, I don't. So when Tarzan absolutely believes that he's an ape, absolutely believes his ape dad is his dad. He was my mother, my father, and he is an ape. And then he meets the humans and everything clicks in. He didn't know he was an ape up until that point. And so much makes sense. And I think I joke about that's why he, his hot best mate wiggling her arse in his face didn't turn him on. It's because he doesn't fancy chimps. So it's kind of being Tarzan and realizing you're not an ape and you were never going to be an ape. No matter how hard you tried, you were never going to be an ape. So stop trying to be an ape. But actually you don't fit in the human world perfectly either. And there's a bit in the film where he goes, half of me is Earl of Greystoke, because he finds out it's Earl of Greystoke, but the other half is wild. And that's how I feel about ADHD. It's like, I'm so much better at coping with my life, but I will order 17 Tibetan prayer wheels by accident when I was trying to do an Ocado shop. I will do that. I phoned my agent on Saturday about the phone rang for ages before he picked it up. I was like, oh, he's not taking my call straight away. And then I said, hi, listen, my friend wants to get some work. My friend's daughter wants some work experience and I think she'd be a really good fit. And he's been a bit, okay, well, tell her to drop me a line. I was like, fine. And it was later that evening I realized it was a Saturday. I'd called him up on a Saturday. And I could hear his kids in the background. I thought, maybe he's working from home. And I thought there was a time where that would have sent me into a shame spiral. And I would have thought, well, now he hates me. He's going to drop me. He's sat with his family now going, she's a nightmare. Why do I represent her? But I didn't do that. I said, oh, Shap, you have ADHD. You didn't know what day it was. I dropped him a little line and I said, sorry, didn't realize it was Saturday. Forgive me. That was all that was needed. And I really noticed that this weekend, that the shame came and I went, no, fuck off. You're an ape. Half of you is wild.
It's a really powerful analogy. And it's going to be great for the listeners. It is so sad. So many of us really try to force ourselves into a round hole when we're square. And we just hammered ourselves into these little round holes. And of course, that's going to result in low self-esteem and anxiety and all of the other comorbidities that somehow come with ADHD when you don't accept that you are, in your case, the beautiful analogy of being the ape. And it is a neurotypical world. We're neurodivergent. There's amazing strengths to us and everyone with the neurodivergence. And when you accept that you are maybe a little bit different to how society expects people to be, and you stop trying to mold yourself into something that you're not in order to please other people, then that's really powerful. So thanks for sharing that.
My pleasure. And with the low self-esteem thing as well, it's not just teachers and work colleagues, it's your family and your partners who love you, who see an abundance of intelligence in you and are, you're articulate on all this, and they just don't understand why you can't do things that they find really easy. And that baffles them. So they're like, but you always do this. And that's the other thing where I've said to some of my friends and also to my children that we will not have people taking the mickey out of me anymore. Scatty Shappi, that doesn't exist, because I'm looking after someone's child on Thursday, and she rang me. She goes, just to check that everything's still okay for Thursday. And I was like, absolutely. And she was like, I hope you don't mind me checking. And I said, I know why you're checking, and I'm not offended by it. Absolutely. And I'm glad you've checked, because once I had to pick someone's kid up from school, and I was on a plane on a flight to Norway for work, and I got a call from the school saying, are you meant to pick up Jack? I was like, oh my God. So I get it. Check in on me. I won't ever be offended, but don't take the mickey out of me. And you know what she's like, or better not give that, So there's a lot of, once I was able to build my confidence up and understand myself better, I can then lay boundaries of how I want to be treated and how I don't want to be treated. I don't take lightly to people making jokes about my disorganization anymore. I think, call me disorganized. Do you know how big the ship I'm sailing is? You try doing all the things I do and raising 2 kids beautifully and losing your purse every week.
Powerful stuff. And congratulations on the mindset shift.
Thank you.
Liberating. Being diagnosed with ADHD and being a comedian, the creative comedy mind of which is constantly flipping from one thought to the next. And I'm sure the two go hand in hand. But how did this fluid nature of the way the brain works serve in holding down jobs and relationships?
Well, I didn't really. Jobs were... So I remember leaving university and all my friends getting temping jobs or going off to get jobs, and I couldn't, because you had to fill in forms and write a CV, things that were beyond me. So I got a job. I'd been a cleaner as a student, so I carried on getting cleaning jobs, and I started to do life modelling. And for me, cleaning and life modelling meant that, number one, I didn't have a job. I didn't have a boss, and the hours were scattered. They weren't... 9 to 5, it was like a bit here, a bit there, go and clean here and then go and do a life modelling job. So that worked for me. And it also meant I could daydream. And it meant that the people that were around me, it just felt, I worked with other cleaners in a hospital. It felt egalitarian. I was a life model in art colleges all over East London, and the students and I we'd become friends. And I did that until comedy paid the rent. So I think if I went back to my childhood and my school days, and I was able in exams to demonstrate my potential, that fucking word, can I swear?
Yes,
that
go ahead.
Fucking word, potential. I possibly would have felt more confident about my abilities and like getting a job, but I know that I would have not been able to cope in a job when I had to go to the same place every day. Because jobs when I had, little office jobs when I did work experience, or I worked in a call center for a while and a printing shop for a while, and they would go, can you go and fax this? And I remember not having the confidence to say I don't know how to use a fax machine. And I remember standing at this fax machine and the tears would come, because when I got frustrated, I cried. So I cried so often when I was in that whirl of being immobilized because I was bewildered by what I'd been asked. And so when you're in that state, even if someone is trying to show you, I don't have a prayer of hearing them. It's like, because all the blood's going and my brain's literally scattered and I'm feeling shame because they've felt a lump in my throat. And suddenly there's a grown woman crying at the fax machine. Oh, and lots of stuff like that would bring me so much shame in shared workspaces. And I couldn't cope with them at all. Even going into a kitchen and someone would bustle in knowing what they're doing. I asked someone in a workplace if they want a cup of tea. And I made them the cup of tea. And she took the cup of tea. She goes, oh, I need more milk. I can't drink it if it's that colour. Someone else might have gone, oh, she's a bit rude. Or, oh, all right, missus, you get what you're given. I felt like I'd been shot in the heart. That was like, oh, she hates me. Everyone hates me. I didn't make the tea right. And that rejection sensitivity. And my masking set meant that I couldn't verbalize that to anyone. I couldn't say to someone how I felt. I didn't know how I felt. There's someone said something about anxiety. I didn't know I had anxiety in the same way that a dog doesn't know it's a dog. I didn't know that. I thought, God, I've got to stop being weird. I'm being weird. So that's how it impacted jobs. And in stand-up, oh my God, it wasn't a breeze, because I had all the erosion of self-confidence that had come from not getting a good education because of my issues, learning difficulties, let's call them that. There weren't very many women. It was just so difficult. And at parties, like everyone said, you've got to go and schmooze. I would just stand in a corner and talk to the bar staff. That was my happy place. Or I'd get shit-faced. So I think drinking lots after hours really affected my professional life, because I think I was seen as not serious about my work. I would get drunk and tell agents about my really bad gigs, because I thought that would be funny. I wouldn't tell glory stories. I'd tell like, oh, isn't it funny? Because I was so shit at this club. I stank the room out. It's hilarious. And everyone go, that's really funny, but we're not gonna put her on our books. So that really affected me. Relationships, it's trickier to tell, because with all of that comes with upbringing and what you've been shown and how you've dealt with conflict in your family. And I found staying in a relationship really hard, so hard. The rejection sensitivity was acute. I thought that they'd leave at any moment. Like if someone everything was just like a bubble. Like everything good would just pop and disappear, and nothing was there to stay. And I couldn't believe it when men told me that they loved me. And also on top of that, I just I have an addictive personality, right? That I've learned now that binge drinking and binge eating and sex quieten down the ADHD motor. So I was self-medicating with food and sex and booze. And I had no idea I was doing that. So I hurt people, and I got hurt. It's a mess. It was a real mess. I'm finally at a place where I'm in a relationship that's, really loving. And don't get me wrong, to all the men I've loved before. I've had lovely, last couple before him were lovely too, but I was unable to cope. But it's taken a lot of rebuilding and strong ego, strong self-esteem to be in a relationship and deal with things rationally. Because I used to say, oh, I'm going out with this really great guy. And I remember my friend Duncan said, yeah, how long have you been with him? And I was like, 6 months. And how many times have you dumped him in that 6 months? 7. I would just go, right, we're done then. We're done. The slightest thing. And I would just be horrible, you know? And I had no idea that it was my brain chemicals that weren't serving me.
We've had a couple of guests on and they speak about this sort of 2-year cycle. They get super obsessed in the early stages. Fast forward 2 years and they've had enough. They're bored. So with you, is it more of a 6-month cycle?
Well, when I was younger, it was more not heeding red flags and dating people who were completely unsuitable for me. And the people that were really suitable for me, the geeks, the boffins, I didn't know how to talk to them. I just didn't. I'd watch other women talk to guys like normally, chit chat, and I couldn't get eye contact. I was like, how do you maintain eye contact with someone that you fancy? Like a lot of us when we're in our teens and when we're younger, we have that problem. But as I got older, that didn't change. And I felt that I had to hide every aspect of my personality and just hope they fancied my looks, you know, and that was really bonkers. And then when I met my husband, when I was in my early 30s, we just met at a gig. And I remember he said to me, why do you pretend you're less intelligent than you are? And that's the first sort of meaningful question anyone had ever asked me that I remembered. That obviously did, but I was not able to see it. And so I was like, wow, I can really talk to this guy. And now I know that that's normal to be able to talk to someone beyond the surface. But at the time I thought, this is so special. This is love, like in the films. And now I think, no, this is just a normal connection. And there's lots of other things to consider if you're compatible or not. So I just didn't know what was best for me. And critically, the whole scatterbrainness of ADHD, which I know is massively linked with trauma. So I can't differentiate which was the culprit for every event or every characteristic that I displayed. But I didn't know until I was much older that I had needs and that I had strong values. So I went against my own values a lot, which is a very painful thing to do. And I stayed in situations where my needs weren't being met because I didn't know I had needs. And that's taken a lot of growing and understanding of like how I work and how my brain works to define those things.
What would be an example of A, what your values are, and then B, you going against them?
So one of my values, okay, this is a little thing. Obviously there are much bigger things, like fidelity and all of that, but let's stick with something really little. One of my values, core value in me, is when someone has made something, any artistic endeavor, it is a value, right? And I don't stay with other people's work that I haven't enjoyed. And I've been with people, not necessarily partners, but friends who spend their time slating other people's work. And that doesn't sit right with me. That being with that person does not nourish me. And yet I would remain with friends like that. And I would remain with some partners like that, not for very long. But that is something that is really critical to me. So, and I really notice, so my partner is a comedian, and I really see that in him, that if he hasn't got something positive to say about someone else's work, he doesn't say anything. And that's not about being like, oh, just hashtag be kind. It's not about that. It's about wanting to be in the moment and being joyful and being positive. So that is a value I have. And that's a value I have with my children, and that's something I hope I've instilled in them. And we don't trash anyone's work. Even if we go to the cinema, like, we saw the Wonka film. And, I don't know if you've seen the Wonka film, but we were like, do you know what? I love the music. I love the music. I love Neil Hannon. I could listen to anything Neil Hannon said, and weren't they brilliant performers? Wouldn't watch it again. Move on, right? But there are some people that would tear it to shreds and laugh about it. And that hurts me because I think if that's how you're treating their artistic endeavours, what are you saying to yourself about your own? So that's a value.
Were there particular moments in relationships which forced you against those values?
Yeah. Like, I can't stand hearing another comic slagged off by someone who isn't a comic. Like I had a boyfriend who thought, oh yeah, that person's shit though. They're shit. Oh, I just think, I can't fuck you anymore. I find it really difficult. But it would take me a long time to realise that that's my value. And I don't like that in the same way as I don't like someone chewing with their mouth gaping open. Like it's, you, not criticise, you do you, but that's not going to be my life because I don't like it. It says more about you. Oh, this all sounds so fridge magnet, but it does say more about you than them. And why are we talking for half an hour about someone that you don't like? That sort of thing. And I remember I had a boyfriend that was so negative. And also I had a boyfriend who was homophobic. And that really bothered me. And I got in, I shouldn't say this because let's keep anonymity, but that relationship went quite far. And I couldn't cope. I can't cope with homophobia, but I was younger and him and his mates would, that would be their humour. And I ended up at a dinner party with his friends and I did say something and I ended up crying because they all turned on me, because I'd just started doing stand-up. It's like, well, you haven't got a sense of humour anyway. We've seen your set. Da, 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 da. And I was like, no, I just don't find being gay funny. That's not humour. That's an attitude. And I cried and I left the house and I was so angry with the boyfriend for not saying anything. And I was like, are you a homophobe? And that relationship should not have lasted 2 years because that red flag was there from the start, So that's my values. And I should have said that rather than the Wonka film, really. That was deeper.
There's boundaries, isn't there? I mean, so many people with ADHD struggle to put boundaries in.
Didn't know what a fucking boundary was until about 5 years ago. Boundary? Didn't know what boundary was. No idea what boundary was.
I want to stick with the topic of RSD a bit more. Moving around a lot when you were younger, changing country, feeling foreign, facing racism, having ADHD, being shy, that's a lot to deal with for someone who is likely to be emotionally sensitive. What do you think the most testing part of your life has been as far as as far as RSD is concerned?
As a family, we stuck out like a sore thumb. And that's not even because we're foreign. I think my dad is a very exuberant character. He's very outgoing. And despite his very strong Iranian accent and very foreignness, he would just go up to neighbours and go, you come to our house for dinner. And I'm like, Dad, people don't do that here. But people would come around to dinner and he would be the centre of attention in a social whirl. And I'd be like, okay, so I'll leave that to him. And then my dad could never understand why I was shy, although he's since explained to me that he was shy too, but he became famous in Iran and that fame brought him out, gave him that fake confidence. And so the rejection sensitivity thing is really horrible. And I have to remind myself sometimes that it's actually okay if you're not someone's cup of tea. That's all right. And it's okay if someone isn't my cup of tea. I found that really difficult. I so don't want people to know that I don't want to spend... I once hid, not even once, this is like 3 years ago, I crouched down behind a parked van to avoid someone I didn't want to say hello to. And what's worse, my daughter was with me and I made her crouch down. And she was like, Mummy, why are you hiding? And I said, darling, there's someone I just for reasons I can't explain, I can't open my mouth and say hello to because they affect me in a way that isn't rational and it's not their fault. And I'm not being very grown up right now. I don't want you to think that this is good. And then when this person passed, I'm sure she saw it, I had to have a chat with my daughter, just going, what are other ways I could have handled that? And it's really, really difficult. For someone that has rejection sensitivity dysmorphia, I could also be a real bitch. I have sometimes just been really unkind because I couldn't deal with myself. And so this has made me a lot more compassionate towards other people who are dicks. I'm so much better at handling dickheads because I think you're not a happy person thinking I'm going to go and ruin her morning. You've got your own shit going on and you're trying to navigate, and I was not what you needed in that moment, and that's okay.
I think it takes a lot of self-awareness to recognise how that situation would have unfolded. If you didn't jump behind that van, you probably would have got into a conversation with that person and they might have made you feel really, really rotten. So to have that self-awareness to avoid it, and I think it's easy to label behaviour like that as shameful, but I think if you've got that awareness and you avoid situations that are going to make you feel bad, I don't particularly think there's shame there. I think it's quite empowering.
Well, I hear that, but also the dopamine need would make me gravitate towards people that really weren't very nice to me. And the person I was hiding from was someone who was being needy towards me. And that's what I identified as a problem that I have, is that rejection sensitivity dysmorphia made me value the attention of someone who was not kind to me, didn't make me feel good, but occasionally did. So I'd get addicted to that moment that they did treat me like a decent human being. And that played out a lot in my friendships. And I've learned that the funniest person in the room is not actually going to make the best friend a lot of the time. Look for the quiet person that in the past I'd have gone, oh my God, she's so boring. What did she do? She's so boring. But actually, she's not boring. She's thoughtful. And they're good friends. So understanding what I needed was good friends rather than friends who entertain me and give me a dopamine kick. And rejection sensitivity made me quite very, very needy. Let's not be mealy-mouthed. I nearly said quite very needy. And I would look to the wrong people to fulfill that need. So when someone saw strength in me and needed me, I'd be like, oh, back off, sister. I've got my own shit going on. I'm not like that anymore. I'm so choosy about who I let into my life now. And I'm much more compassionate towards people who are needy. Yeah.
You mentioned your dad before. What do your parents think about ADHD and everything that it entails?
You imagine they remember the conversations I have with them about it. I'll tell you something that I think is funny. I'm not saying my dad has ADHD, but we are very similar. He sleeps, he falls asleep. I fall asleep. When he's bored, he falls asleep. I fell asleep in a GCSE exam. He's never been able to watch a film or a play to the end without sleeping unless it's really grabbed him by the throat, right? Unless it's got to make him really laugh or it's got to tear his heart out, same as me. And just yesterday, my ex-mother-in-law was very ill and I had to drive my son to Nottingham to see her. And I spoke to my dad on the phone and I said, she's very ill, so I'm taking my boy up to see her. And about an hour later, on the family WhatsApp, Shap, where are you tonight? I'm going to Nottingham because Cass's grandma's poorly. And my dad's like, no, what's wrong with her? And I said, Dad, I told you on the phone. It's not that he forgot, he wasn't listening. He can't listen on the phone. I can tell him about ADHD and stuff, but there's only certain times when he actually absorbs things because his mind is in a billion other places. And with my dad and also my brother, I used to get so upset with them because when I wanted to tell them something, they had this manic thing of get to the end. I don't need you to go around the houses, get to the end. And I'll be like, fuck's sake, I'm not, that would get me in a panic and make me feel like I'm boring them, which I was. I was boring them. They can't listen to a meandering story. They need to get the headline. And people say that now, give me the headline. It's like, get you a psychotherapist. And now I realise that they weren't trying to be horrible. They didn't find me boring. They can't focus for long enough. If it's important, tell me straight away. They can't listen to my flights of fancy. And I'm a lot more compassionate, I think, with them now as well. But my brother literally doesn't hear the things I say on the phone. Like, we'll arrange to meet and we won't hear what one another has said. It's really hard. But they know that, I don't know, I think my parents are divergent enough not to be quite sure what's going on with me and my ADHD.
It's such an echo of so many people. I think you sort of, one person in a family gets a diagnosis, and then that person sort of starts spotting it in others.
Yeah, it's like, what's that film? I see ADHD people. That's why. What was it called?
Sixth Sense.
Sixth Sense. I see people with ADHD everywhere. And I'm...
What would we name that film? The sixth neurodivergence is not funny. What would be a funny name for that film?
Well, some people might say the superpower, but I don't like that term. It's my superpower. I know it's helpful for some people. I think a lot of people that get diagnosed in childhood, or early teens, they embrace the whole superpower thing. Much more so than people my age, because I'm a little bit like, guys, you're going to go through your entire adult life knowing, and I'm so happy for you, but it wasn't my fucking superpower.
There's a very interesting story you tell about your wedding day. But first, before we get to that, I want to hear about your ADHD item. Every week I ask my guest to tell me an item that most represents ADHD for them, and yours is underneath this cloth, and I'm going to lift it up and pass it to you. There we go.
Ta-da!
Little Miss Scatterbrain book.
Yes.
That's probably quite self-explanatory, I think, actually, with your book. But no, you go ahead.
Well, because I called my book Scatterbrain, and it didn't occur to me until I started writing my show, and I saw this around my house, and I thought, this has been in my life, all of my life, in my own childhood and then my children's childhood. So yes, I did plagiarize the name accidentally, Little Miss Scatterbrain. So this is my ADHD object because my reading was an obsession and my escapism, reading and writing. So I read obsessively, and everyone thought it was so wonderful that I'm a reader, but I read like this book and I reread this. I've read Adrian Mole's diary more times than anyone could ever count. And going into books, and Miss Scatterbrain absolutely makes sense. There's a bit where she gets, everyone knew her home was called Buttercup Cottage. Everyone knew it was called Buttercup Cottage except the owner, who kept forgetting. I know, she thought to herself, to help me remember, I'll put up a sign. That makes sense to me, right? Like you forget things and you put the cat in the fridge, and she's gone into the bank to buy sausages. I once found myself I meant to go to my accountant's, and I ended up going to the shop in Oxford Circus that I bought my wedding dress from. And instead of thinking, I've come to the wrong place, I looked at the wedding shop. I went, oh, my accountant's changed his shop into a wedding dress shop. That made more logical sense to me for far too many minutes, Alex, that I haven't gone to the wrong place. My accountant has had a change of career. He's now making petticoats. It took me too long to realise my own mistake. And that sort of thing happened to me a lot. It's in my logical mind, that makes sense. You've changed your career rather than I've taken a wrong turning. And I moved into a bedsit years ago. And the way I knew where my bedsit was there was scaffolding on the house next door. And one day I went out in the afternoon and I got shit-faced and I couldn't find my house because the neighbours had taken the scaffolding down. I had it was a really long road, no prayer of finding my house. And I had a boyfriend who lived in Aldershot and he had to drive to take me to my own home. And he did he bought some paint and he wrote this one on the wall outside my house. It's stuff like that people would go, oh, you're such a scatterbrain, and mock you for it. But now I'm like, oh, fuck off. I will go to the wrong place. I did book a holiday to Mallorca and a hotel in France. That sort of stuff has happened to me. It's the tax you pay for my brain, and I'm a lot of fun at parties.
Well, yeah, hugely relatable. And so it's essentially, it could be your autobiography.
Yeah, it pretty much is. I mean, my own actual book is this, just padded out. But the thing about the shyness and the rejection sensitivity, for so many years, alcohol became my crutch for that. And in January, I stopped drinking. And I realised that I haven't changed in terms of my shyness. I will go to an industry party and I am prepared. I say to myself, you're going to go into this party, you look the business, you're going to go in, you're not immediately going to see someone you know, or if you do, they'll be talking to someone else. You're going to feel really anxious and you might feel tears prickling in your eyes. When that happens, you're going to breathe. You're going to go into a corner and you're going to breathe and you're going to trust that in 20 minutes, you'll be having a great time. And that has happened every time. And I really needed that to happen because it's just, you can't live your life when the only way you can cope with a social situation is by drinking. Like even like 1 or 2 drinks, like affects your confidence. So what am I like? Why don't I let myself, actual me, grow? And it turns out, and one of the difficult things about giving up drinking is realizing that I can't blame anything on the drink. I still say stupid, awkward things. I still blurt out oversharing information, like go into a bar with fancy people from a meeting for work and suddenly go, oh, I've had sex in their toilets. I will blurt stuff out sober, and that's okay. That's all right. I will own that, and I'm not going to have any shame around it. So that has been quite cathartic. And sometimes people soberly will hang out with me and think I'm a dickhead. That's okay. All right.
Well, you're being unapologetically yourself right now.
Yeah. It's a sweet release.
Let me put that on the table because I want to do the ADHD agony aunt section, which I've called the washing machine of woes, because my ADHD item is a washing machine because I always leave my laundry in the machine.
Oh, and then it smells.
It smells of damp.
And you've got to do it again.
I'll do it again.
Do you put those little these little grains in it? It's probably really environmentally unfriendly.
Yeah, I put like pouches and also I put a antibacterial liquid in the top. So it smells great.
Yeah.
But then I forget to empty it, so it doesn't last very long.
Oh.
Do you forget your laundry?
Mate.
It's another tax, right?
I smell of damp right now. It's not the weather, actually. Smell of damp.
Every week I ask my Instagram community to send in their ADHD woes, and one goes in the washing machine, and I read it out. And this week in the machine, I have a friend who's recently moved with her family to London from Asia, and she's really struggling to settle in. We're 14. She said she's been diagnosed with ADHD and it's making her time at school overwhelming. What can I tell her to make her feel better?
Oh, that makes me sad. So 14, moved to a new country from a very different continent. Doesn't know. There's lots of other information I want, which you can't give me. Like, is it an international school? Is it a state school? Do they have good pastoral care? So just on the information you're given, I would say you say to your friend, even though right. I would say to your friend, when you're at school, even though you can't see me, I'm there, and figure out something, an object that maybe something she can wear around her wrist, like this hairband is now me. So when you're in school and you're feeling overwhelmed, you are still connected with me. And that is a tool that I've used when I have been in situations that with strangers that I know I'm going to find overwhelming. I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. And I learned to do that, and it really kept me sane in there. I know that being on a really well-paid, highly viewed TV show isn't quite the same as being a child immigrant in a new environment, but loneliness is loneliness and overwhelm is overwhelm. But I would tell your friend, find a physical object, anything small that you can carry around, and that's me with you, and we connect. And I'm there. And that will give her the confidence she or he or they need to navigate their environment. And I guarantee you, in a really short space of time, they'll feel completely at home.
Wow. Thank you very much. You got quite emotional there.
I did get emotional. I can't, anything to do with teens and children, I get really, really...
Are you okay? Do you want to take a break?
Yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. But it's, I just really relate to it, and it's a huge reason why I started training to be a psychotherapist, because I need somewhere to put my experiences, because there are so few psychotherapists. Certainly it took me a long time to find someone who truly understands ADHD, divergence, overwhelm, because so my daughter's going into my daughter's going into high school next year. And like anything, like any parent, you want to do the best for your kid. And the instinct for my son, when we moved areas and he had to go to a new school when I didn't know any of this stuff, was to say to him, darling, you're starting a new school. When I was 5, I had to start a new country. I couldn't even speak English. Well, that's not going to make him feel better in the here and now, right? So I didn't make him feel better. And my daughter, when she talked to me about how she feels about high school, I said, yeah, it's big. It's huge. It's huge. It's huge, but we're here. Home's not going anywhere. Your friends aren't going anywhere. Your bestie's going to a different school, but she lives 2 streets away. It's huge. And we're here, the same as I'm here when your team won England South Athletics. The only reason I'm on your podcast is to somehow get out that my daughter's team won England South. But, I said to her, when you're doing your athletics, I'm not physically with you, right? But you know I've got your back. I support you. So same as school. It's a new challenge. So I think that's really important. And that's something that psychotherapy has taught me, that you don't cheer people up. You support them. You keep them company in their challenges.
A very personal question, and one you don't have to answer. What is the process of a relationship coming to an end and then the subsequent divorce like for someone who has a scatty ADHD mind?
Oh, God, my divorce destroyed me. It destroyed me, and I had to rebuild myself brick by brick, and I'm a different shape to the one I was before. And I had no idea how to take care of myself through something like that. I didn't know what self-care meant. My mum moved in with me for a while. I had neighbours that popped in to see me at really odd hours, and I found out a long time later that they were scared I'd die. Not that I'd kill myself. They thought that I would just have a heart attack and die. And that's what it felt like. I felt, how can you be in this much pain and still be alive? And it was the first time I had been rejected in such a seismic way. And my son was only 2. Now, I have to preface this with my ex-husband and I are really friendly, and he is married to a woman who I love. In fact, I'm jealous of him having her. Before, people always think, no, I'm like, God, how did he get her? Why can't I get her? And I'm with the man that I should be with, but I felt like I had been hurled out of a window. And I have a family friend. I'm trying to keep everyone anonymous, and he had a really beautiful hotel in Thailand, and he said, Shappi, pick up your child, I'll pay for your airfare, come and stay with me for a few weeks, and really look after yourself. And I was like, are you kidding me? I have to stay and fight. I have to stay and be enraged. I can't and at the time I was making decent money as well. Like, I could have afforded to take that sort of time off, but I didn't gift myself that time of reflection. And I thought I was suspended in this place of rowing and fighting and being angry and throwing things and being so hard done by. And the thing that really saved me, I think, was my families. Obviously they were devastated as well. And all the horrible shit went down, and my dad and my family were insistent, very gently, that at every point I deploy empathy towards him. He's suffering too in his own way, but you are reacting differently. You shout and scream, he, does what he does, that putting salt on your wounds. So that was really important, because if I learned that if I'm able to keep a thread of empathy towards someone that's harming me, then there is hope of peace on the other side. But that was fucking hard. And looking back, I did, in my own way, find things to help me. I drank. That was not a good thing. But when my son went to stay with my ex-husband, that was the worst part, because I didn't have a child to not see him for 2 days, 3 days, whatever it was, a week. And then this is the thing when people try and cheer you up. What I needed to hear was, Shap, that's shit. I'm going to come around and sit with you and we'll watch Pretty Woman or something. But instead people would go, babe, you got the best of both worlds. You can go out, come to this party, come to this thing. And I'd be like, you don't fucking understand. I don't want to, And then I started going to Zumba classes, and I found I'd never exercised before in my life. And I found that got my fitness up. And then I joined an exercise class in the park, and that really got my fitness up. And then when the exercise class wasn't on, my legs were itching to move. Then I started running. I started running long distance. I got to a point where 10, 15K in the morning was nothing to me. And I now realize that was self-care. I lived near Richmond Park. Richmond Park was my therapy, because I did try and see a therapist. Didn't really work. I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't ready to take off the layers. No chance. And I did try to do meditation classes, but I was like, I've got shit to do. Lady, hurry this up, But running was my savior, and it stopped me drinking as much, and it got the endorphins going. It got the dopamine hit that stayed with me throughout the day. Oh, I loved it. So whenever people talk to me about ADHD and I can't get a diagnosis, I need the pills, I go, do you need the pills or do you need to hug a tree? Because being with trees, in trees, I'd go running and sometimes I'd just sit up a tree for a while. So important to sit up a tree.
Do you think everything you've been through, including your late diagnosis, has helped you build your career?
No. I think if I'd been diagnosed earlier, my career would have been more joyful rather than anxiety-driven. a lot of people say to me, oh yeah, but without the ADHD, you might not have become a comic. So I wanted to be a comic from when I was like 3 or 4 years old. I love comedy. I wanted to be part of that world. And I would have had the confidence to put myself in positions where it would be much more joyous. Whereas I was in a pit of anxiety, desperately trying to get to the joy. And now I'm in a situation with my career where I don't do anything unless it's going to bring me joy. Whereas before, I would say yes to everything. I've done Question Time for 3 times, for God's sake. Why? Why was I on Question Time? There was no need for me to be on Newsnight. What the fuck was I doing? Why didn't I have the confidence to say, no, thank you, I'm a stand-up comedian? I have so much respect for comedians who've said no to Live at the Apollo. I did Live at the Apollo 3 years in a row because at the time there weren't enough women to have a woman on, and it was detrimental to my career because I was going through a divorce. I simply didn't have the bulletproof material the second 2 times, and it showed, and it damaged my reputation as a comic. I'm not proud of the output, and I feel so relieved to be able to say it. First Live at the Apollo that I did, the jokes have not stood the test of time, but that's what comedy is. It's a culture, it's a moving iceberg, so that's fine, but I stand by it. I'm proud of it. But the other 2, I should have been in a quiet room, in a white robe, listening to whale music. I should not have been on stage at such a high-profile comedy gig. And I feel that these days, all of us, including agents and producers, we're much more aware of mental health stuff. And they would have thought, no, Shappi is round the twist at the moment. We won't do this. But at the time they're like, oh God, you wear your heart on a sleeve, Shappi. You've let your personal life interfere with your professional life, and it's really affected it, and all of this stuff, and made it all my fault. Whereas now we're like, nah, you should have kind of, people see that you shouldn't be up there right now. But now my on stage, like I'm going on tour in September, which I mustn't forget to mention. I'm going on tour in September, and on stage now, I'm so different to what I was like before. It's all joy. I'm finally returned to 10-year-old me that used to just love performing without any anxiety.
Where do you think you'd be in life if it wasn't for comedy, without your sense of humour? And what purpose does your sense of humour serve in softening the blow in everything we've spoken about today?
Where would I be in life without my sense of humour? Well, that's difficult to say, because it's like, where would I be in my life if my mum and dad weren't my mum and dad? Because they're performers. My dad's a writer, he's a comic. Humour is so a part of our family's culture. So I wouldn't be part of that family if it wasn't for that. I think if circumstances were different, I would always have been a writer. I think I would have written books much earlier, because I wouldn't have had the insane need to be out in the thick of it all the time. I would have been able to be quiet and alone and introspective. And I definitely think that psychotherapy would have been an avenue I would have explored regardless of ADHD, because my main interest in life is other people. Other people are like huge caves to explore, and they are never boring. People are never, ever boring. So I think I would definitely have gone into psychotherapy or psychiatry or something, but I would have been the best at it. And I would have had, fellowships from 1 billion different universities, and probably lived in, New York, and been horribly rich from all the corporate speaking that I did about the new psychotherapy methods that I developed. Something like that.
Before your ADHD item, Shappi, I mentioned a story on your wedding day. Could you enlighten us with that?
Yeah, my wedding day was so It's organisation, right? And I'm not an organiser. And also I've got that thing of not being an organiser and also being a perfectionist. And I think some people might relate to this, where a lot of the time I didn't get stuff done, like an essay, because I would start writing it and my handwriting, this is days before, computers, my handwriting wouldn't be perfect. So I'd have to start all over again instead of just crossing it out, just all over again. And then I'd have a pile of papers this high. So the nuts and bolts of organising a wedding was unreal for me. And yet I was obsessed with having this perfect day. So the organisation of my wedding was crazy, and I offended a lot of people because my dad drew a cartoon for our wedding invites, but they were the same. So we had people, like 80 people, watch us get married and stay for the food and all that. And then we had evening guests, and I got into a muddle, and I sent invitations for the whole day to people that I just got drunk with at the Edinburgh Festival that summer. And I had people that I got drunk with at the Edinburgh Festival invited to the most intimate part of my wedding and doing my vows. So it was a bit nuts. And I was quite consumed by having this perfect English wedding, to the point that I was saying to my dad, like, you can't invite too many Iranians. I don't want it to be my big fat Iranian wedding. How rude. I wish I had my big fat Iranian wedding. And then my dad wanted to wear this canary yellow suit. And I was like, you can't wear that. The photos, all this nonsense that I didn't even know was an issue with me. And then I said to my dad, so you walk me down the aisle. Now, my dad is from a country where that doesn't happen. And he's like, I walk you down the aisle. And I said, yes, it's a tradition. You walk me down the aisle and you give me away to Christian. And my dad was like, what are you, a cow? What am I, a farmer giving my cow? I'm not going to give you away. You're not property. Have I taught you nothing? I was like, oh, I don't need your fucking politics now. And so my brother ended up walking me down the aisle. And my brother, I started to get emotional. And then in front of all our friends, he went, oh, sorry, she's crying. And he pushed me into this loo. We got married just across the road from where we are now on this boat. Pushed me in a loo, and then everyone laughed, and I was like, oh, now my wedding day is becoming a circus. And then I went to do my vows, and I'd printed our vows on really beautiful gold paper that for some reason no one had handed to the registrar. So we had bits of paper. And as I'm saying my fucking wedding vows, I'm thinking, this should have been on gold paper. So that not being in the moment really affected the most important moment in my life. And after we did our vows, I got that feeling of, oh, I just did a really shit gig. That sinking feeling. And I look back and I just go, there's someone that didn't know she had ADHD, didn't know how to let things go, didn't know how to be in the moment, was catastrophizing, not being empathetic to other people's beliefs and needs and values and all of this. And I didn't stop to take a breath at any point. So, I think that if I got married again, things would be done very differently.
Being very much an outsider through neurodivergent means, and back when you came to the UK, feeling like an outsider through race too, do you have an explanation in a nutshell that might best describe how ostracised a person would feel and did feel in that scenario?
Yeah, it feels like you're underwater. Everything's on the surface and you want to get to the surface to breathe, but you don't know how to get there. So being on the outside looking in was a very familiar feeling to me. Socially, oh God, I'm not making the most of my youth. Other people are going for picnics and throwing frisbees and I've been invited, but I can't join in the frisbee throwing. And how are these people having this fun? How are they communicating normally? How are they having a laugh and cracking a joke? This is really, really difficult. And I would just be not being able to reach the surface. And I think moving to another country, the language was a huge thing. And I made quite a semi-conscious decision to speak English with my kids. And everyone's like, oh, what a shame they don't speak Farsi. But in order to be bilingual, you only hear the other language from your parent, right? And that would mean that when we took the cat to the vet, it would be in Farsi. When we cracked a joke, when we're talking about faulty towers, Morecambe and Wise, Gorillas in the Mist, all the things I like, all the bands I like. I can't do that in Farsi. And my emotional language is English. And I thought, I want my kids to feel in amongst it and not looking up at the surface. I want them to be on the surface. And also, I did think that, my parents will speak to them in Farsi, but their attitudes changed about keeping their native tongue. I said to my dad, look, if you don't speak to the baby in Farsi, it's not going to learn. And my dad suddenly goes, let them be English. Don't give them identity crisis. I was like, flipping out. You told us the opposite. You have to make sure you keep up your Farsi because when we go back to Iran, we don't want you to be behind at school and all of that. So there was always that outsider thing going on. And I don't know, if I had been my children, and in the times we are now, with the knowledge we have now and the support we have now, I don't know just how much, if ADHD would have affected me as profoundly as it has, because I cannot talk, I cannot ignore the fact that trauma exacerbates ADHD. So to have ADHD, but without the nuclear fuel of trauma, I think it would have been, a different story, but we're in the here and now. And it's something I've used in my creativity unwittingly. So I wrote a novel called Nina's Not Okay about a young alcoholic teenager. And I snooped in on an online chat about it where people were going, young people who know about these things more than I did, said, oh, well, Nina's clearly, she's clearly got ADHD. And I wrote it way before I was diagnosed. I was like, has she? What are they talking about? And I have a look at it now, and my main character is riddled with ADHD. So there we are.
This has been truly, truly fascinating, Shappi. Thank you so much for being so honest and open today. We have a closing tradition on the podcast, and that's to ask all of our guests what their most impulsive thing they've ever done is.
The minute you say that, I just go to gruesome one-night stands that should never have happened. So let me just rifle through them to something more acceptable. Having a baby. You know what? It's like the most impulsive thing I've ever done is a question that a neurotypical person could answer a lot easier than someone with ADHD. Like, whatever it was, there's a good chance I'll trump it on the way home today. I've done mad stuff. I have run on stage as a member of the audience when no one invited me on stage. I went on the stage, this mime artist, when I was a student in Winchester. There was a bit of audience participation, but he hadn't invited anyone on the stage. And I just ran, and I ran down, and I got onto the stage with him. Oh my God, I've never said that out loud before. But a lot of, when you say something impulsive I've done, a lot of it has been really stuff that's brought me a lot of shame around sex, right? That has been either public or with people that have treated me really badly or have gone against my values and all of that. So I had this period of being single a few years ago where I had a much better idea of myself. And I had conscious, enthusiastic consent. This is a term my teenage son taught me. Enthusiastic consent one-night stands. Oh, he didn't teach me after I told him about the one-night stands, to be clear. But I had 2 one-night stands where I had decided to do it. It was fun. I liked the guys. I told them it was going to be a one-night stand. It was funny and honest. And it was so cathartic to do that because it had only ever been spontaneous, impulsive stuff that I did, even as I was doing it, I didn't want to do, but I was on that train and I couldn't make it stop. So I don't know if I've answered your question. I'm going to leave here and think of something really batshit I've done. Really stupid thing I've done. This is the most awful impulsive thing I've done was with my newborn baby boy at 6 weeks. We went to a friend's house. We put him on a little trampoline. It wasn't a friend's house. It was my ex-husband's extended family. So I was feeling very social anxiety and not being able to center myself. Censor myself is not what I've been able to do on this podcast. But my boy is on this bouncy castle, bouncing ever so gently in the wind. How cute. And I got up and I jumped up and I belly flopped next to him. And my baby boy went flying. And my husband and everyone was horrified. And it was almost in slow motion. I saw this baby go up and this baby go down again. And everyone was so angry with me. And looking back, I think I should have been indoors. I didn't want to be outside. I get really sticky in hot weather and I don't like it. I wasn't comfortable with my baby being on a trampoline at all. And instead of going, right, guys, I'm going to go in the shade with the baby and breastfeed and just chill, I tried to be the life and soul and did this insane thing that only someone who wasn't paying attention in physics class would do. My son is fine now. But that was the most stupid thing I've ever done. I still am so cross with myself about.
Well, thank you for sharing it on the ADHD Chatter podcast. And a couple of more closing questions. How many screenshots do you have on your phone?
Oh, unreal amount. Unreal.
Hundreds? Thousands?
Tens of thousands of a corner of a carpet or a rotten bit of ginger that I thought I should tell Tesco that they sent me rotten ginger, and I took it from all angles and never made the complaint, but now it's stored on my phone alongside precious family pictures. I worry sometimes that when I'm dead, who is going to go through my phone pictures? Just the utter. Today, I took a picture on the tube of this woman who, it's an extremely hot day in case we haven't mentioned it, this woman who looked incredible, and she was wearing proper furry Yeti boots. And I took a picture and I thought I'd put that on Instagram, and I could hear my son's voice going, nobody cares. So I didn't send it, but that picture will stay on my phone forever. And when I die, they'll go, why the fuck did Mum take a picture of this woman's boots?
What about your WhatsApps? How many unread WhatsApps have you got?
I have got 661.
Well, unread?
Yeah.
WhatsApps?
Yeah, is that bad?
Just having 600 messages is quite impressive. And if that's just the ignored ones.
Look, thing is, I am now in a bit of a swirl and I can't properly look, but I have got an unreal amount of unread stuff everywhere. And sometimes I answer stuff in my head and I don't answer in actual fact to people, which is a problem.
What about tabs on your computer? Do you have lots of them?
Oh, God, yeah. My kids really laugh about that because they go, that's why your battery runs down. And they have a lot of fun sort of going through all my tabs. Like, how can anyone even have looked at? And I didn't know you can close the tabs on your phone. I had no idea.
How many domains do you think you own?
I've got fucking loads of domains. I've got so many domains. And like I suddenly go, I'm going to start a Twitter account that's just for books. So I think I've got Shappi's reading nook or some shit on Twitter that's got like 3 followers. I have all these ideas for things that don't come to fruition. I've got so many pages, like first pages of novels, first pages of plays. Someone said to me recently, I'm writing a book, but I'm just finding it very hard to think of the ending. I'm like, mate, we've all got cupboards full of work that we can't find the ending to. That's the fucking hard part.
Yeah.
We can all fucking go on a once upon a time. That's really easy.
What about items of clothing on your floor? Or are you quite a wardrobe or a floor
I feel
drone?
so seen. Items of clothing on my floor at the moment is about 10, but that will be rectified when I get home. It's just laundry that I just tipped upside down because I needed the basket. But I am, you see, the thing is with what's really changed me is because I lived in disarray, I don't want my kids to live in disarray. That's really important to me. And with my partner, when we got back together after breaking up for a while, because, he's quite practically chaotic as well, I'd say that was one of the things that really bothered me, because for some people it's a little bit of mess and they clear it up. For me, it's going back and undoing everything that I've worked really hard to achieve. Like the very fact that I have a home with more than one room is a massive achievement for me, because I lived in a bedsit until I was 32. And if, I want my kids to live in peace and order so that they can do their homework without having... And so when my partner used to come over and leave his shoes in the middle of my floor, I'd be like, it's hard enough for me to deal with my own shit. I can't clean up your shoes too. And now I realise that was a conversation I could have had with him, but I didn't. I just finished with him and really hurt him. Not just about the shoes. There was the small matter of him not being able to cook aubergine properly. But now I'm like, I don't need you to cook, because I'm really fussy about how aubergine's cooked. Don't add ginger to everything willy-nilly. He thinks things are posh if you add ginger to it. No. So I'm able to verbalise really normal things with him that were the ender of my relationship. Because what I realised I did was, when, instead of confronting conflict, I would avoid conflict by then demonising the person that I had to have an uncomfortable conversation with. I would demonise them and justify my throwing them out of my life. And thank you, Doctor. It has been cathartic to say that out loud. And I don't do that anymore.
Shappi, this has been truly fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.